Hi everyone. So this is the last video for Deuteronomy 6. So we're going to be looking at the last 5 verses, and I'll read them for you. I'm going to go over here. It says, "In the future, when your son asks you, 'What is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you?' Tell him, 'We were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, on Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household. But he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all this law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. That will be our righteousness." So when we look at, one of the things I want to point out is that this promise, right, that Moses is talking about here, it goes all the way back to Abraham, right? He told Abraham that his descendants, number one, that he would have descendants, right, through his son Isaac, which was already, miraculous, given his age, right? So he said that he would have descendants and that they would be given land to inhabit, right? And so and he also told them that before that happened, though, they would be enslaved and they would be under the oppression of a foreign power, that being Egypt. And so this goes back, right, hundreds of years. I mean, this was not, this was not new. God had already promised them this before they were even born. God used Moses to usher in the Israelites in the promised land, and so that's why you see him really stressing the importance of following the commandments, because there's not only a sense of obligation, but there's a sense that their obedience is going to determine their success going forward. The extent to which they are actually going to be able to enjoy what God has promised them. But it's interesting that verse 20. What is the meaning of the stipulations, right? I mean, and you can almost imagine, a young boy at that time, who may not even be completely sold, on the validity of these rules, asking his father, why are we doing this? Why do we have to live like this? Why are we following these rules and traditions? And the response, Moses said, should be, because God brought us out of Egypt and he promised to give us this land. And really all he's asking us to do is be obedient to him. Not really for his sake, but so what? So we might prosper and be kept alive, right? So that we might be able to, conquer the peoples who are already in that land. They do a lot of fighting in order to actually obtain, the land. But God told Joshua right? And we're looking at this is, in the book of Joshua, the beginning of Joshua, that they would ultimately prevail in their military conquests, so to speak. Why? Because that was part of his promise. But we see, the message here, the message in Deuteronomy 6 is the same message that the entire Bible really is trying to convey, and that is that when you obey the instructions laid out for you in Scripture, you will reap success. You will be blessed. All will go well for you, right? You see that there's a direct relationship between prosperity and not just in terms of materialism, but in terms of spiritual well-being, physical well-being, right? I think about that commandment. God said, honor thy mother and thy father, that why? That your days may be long. So that implies that when you do that, you will live a long life, right? And so your health, your overall success and well-being is dependent upon the extent of your obedience. And so what does that show you? That shows you the goodness of God, ultimately, right? Because God is able to really show you his power when you yield yourself to him. He is only able to manifest himself in your life when we are able to humble ourselves enough to be obedient to his instruction. The Israelites being delivered from Egypt after being enslaved for 400 years, that was a very significant thing. It was a very big deal. And a lot of times we find ourselves in bondage in various different capacities. But when you look at the New Testament, and it's clear, God has the power to deliver you, and he will do that. But you have to yield yourself to him in order for him to do that. And I'll just, one more thing in terms of, as we wrap this up, the importance of right. And so there's, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in future videos, but you see that there, look at verse 25, right? And if we are careful to obey this law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. So on the one hand, by faith, right, we go back to Abraham. By faith, Abraham was righteous because he chose to trust God and obey him in doing the things that God told him to do. And so because he believed, because he did those things, righteousness was accounted unto him in the same way that the righteousness of Christ is accounted unto us by faith in the death and resurrection of Christ. And so now that's one part of it. The other part of it is your works, essentially in this case, your obedience. And so it's important for us to live up that title, right? It is important for us to act in a way that is pleasing to God, not because we have to in order to gain favor with God, but because we have already been given that title. And so now we have to act in accordance with it, so that God might be glorified. Because when the only way that God can be glorified is if we're obedient to him.